The invoice arrived at my pharmacy by courier, addressed to my husband, marked personal, do not open. And the courier apologized for delivering it to the wrong building before I'd even signed for it. I signed anyway. Inside was a receipt for a paternity test, dated 6 weeks earlier, and a lab code that matched a name I recognized instantly. My husband's assistant, Priya. I didn't call him. I didn't call her. I set the envelope in my bag, finished counting out a patient's blood pressure medication, and drove home like it was any other Thursday. My name is Dana Reyes. I'm 36, a hospital pharmacist in Tucson, married to Marcus for 11 years. We'd spent the last 4 of them trying, unsuccessfully, to have a second child after our son Eli. I'd absorbed every failed round of treatment as evidence of something wrong with my own body, quietly, the way you absorb bad news you've decided not to argue with. Marcus never once suggested it might be him. He didn't need to. I did that work myself, for years, without anyone asking me to. That night I made dinner, helped Eli with his spelling words, and lay next to Marcus in the dark thinking about a lab code instead of sleeping. I didn't confront him. 11 years of filling other people's prescriptions had taught me that the first piece of evidence is never the whole story. You wait, you cross-reference, you find out what the second piece says before you let anyone know you're looking. The next open loop came 3 days later. Marcus mentioned, almost offhand, that Priya was handling something personal and might be out of the office for a while. He said it while pouring cereal, not even looking up. I asked no questions. I filed it. I want to explain something about Marcus, because it matters. He wasn't reckless by nature. He managed a commercial real estate portfolio worth tens of millions of dollars, and he'd built his reputation on being the calm, careful one in every negotiation, the guy who never let emotion show his hand. That same discipline was the reason nobody, including me, ever suspected him of carelessness at home. People who are good at hiding things at work assume they're good at hiding things everywhere. I started where I always start, the paper trail. Our joint card showed a charge at a boutique hotel in Phoenix, 90 minutes away, dated the same week as that courier envelope. I checked our calendar. Marcus had logged it as a site visit, a term he used constantly, which was exactly why it had never once caught my attention before. I called the fertility clinic where we'd done our last 3 rounds and asked, as a formality, to have my full chart resent to me directly, instead of through Marcus's insurance portal, which had always received the summary. The nurse said that was routine, no problem, and would take a few days. While I waited, I found the second reveal. Marcus's mother, Corinne, called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice too bright, asking if I wanted to come by for coffee. Just the 2 of us, no reason. Corinne never called without a reason. I went. She couldn't look at me for the first 10 minutes. Then she told me that 8 years earlier, before Eli was even born, Marcus had gone in for a routine physical and the doctor had flagged something on his blood work, a fertility marker, borderline low, worth monitoring. Corinne had been the emergency contact on file because Marcus was between insurance plans at the time. She'd seen the letter before he did. She'd decided, in her words, it wasn't the kind of thing a young man needed hanging over him before he'd even started trying, and she'd quietly called the doctor's office and asked them to route future correspondence to her instead of the house. She'd been managing it, on and off, for 8 years, without telling either of us. I sat very still and let her keep talking, the way I'd let vendors keep talking when they didn't realize how much they were giving away. She said the marker had worsened over time. She said she'd meant to tell us before we started trying for a second child, but the moment never felt right. And then years had passed, and admitting it felt worse than not admitting it. She said she was telling me now because she'd heard, through Marcus's sister, that there might be a paternity question involving Priya, and she couldn't let me go on believing this was somehow my fault when she'd known for years it very likely wasn't. I didn't yell at Corinne. I asked her one question. Did Marcus know any of this? She said no. Nobody but her and the original doctor's office knew. My chart arrived from the clinic 4 days later. Buried in an addendum I'd never been shown, sent originally to Marcus's insurance portal, never forwarded to me, was a semen analysis from 3 years earlier, showing a significant male factor finding, severe enough that the clinic had recommended a joint consultation to discuss alternative approaches. That consultation had never happened because Marcus had never told me the appointment existed. I don't know, even now, whether he read it and buried it himself or whether Corinne's years of quiet interference had kept it from him too. What I knew was that I had spent 3 years blaming a body that had never been the problem. I didn't confront Marcus with any of it yet. I drove to Phoenix instead, to the hotel on the credit card statement, and ask the front desk, truthfully, calmly, as a woman verifying her own finances, to confirm the dates and the name on the reservation. Marcus Reyes. 1 room, 2 nights, a second guest listed on the incidentals. Priya Nair. The confrontation happened on a Sunday morning, in our kitchen, while Eli was at a friend's house. I laid 3 things on the table: the courier envelope, the hotel folio, and the clinic addendum. I didn't raise my voice. I told Marcus what Corinne had done, what the clinic had buried, and what I now understood about the last 3 years of my own life. I watched his face go through something I can only describe as a slow collapse, not shock at being caught with Priya, but the deeper shock of realizing that his mother had spent nearly a decade making decisions about his own body without telling him, decisions that had let him watch me apologize to him, year after year, for something that was never mine to apologize for. "I didn't know," he said, "about the test. I swear I never saw it." "I believe you," I said. "That doesn't change what you did with Priya. It just means we were both lied to by the same person, in different ways, at different times." He didn't have an answer for that, because there wasn't one. I filed for divorce that week. I didn't ask for punishment through the settlement. Our disclosures were straightforward, and I took only what I was entitled to. The part that mattered more to me was smaller and quieter. I sent the clinic a formal complaint documenting that my medical results had been redirected for years without my authorization. First through a family member's interference, and later through a portal error the clinic itself should have caught. Their compliance office opened a review. 2 months later, they confirmed a breach of my records access rights and changed their intake protocol so no third party could ever again be listed as a default contact on a patient's fertility chart. Priya, it turned out, hadn't known about Corinne's years of secrecy either, and she'd already ended things with Marcus once the paternity test came back. The child, as it happened, wasn't his, which was its own quiet, sad footnote to a story that had already caused enough damage. Marcus moved into a rental across town. Corinne called me twice after that. I let both calls go to voicemail. I don't think I'm angry at her anymore, not exactly. I think I understand that she spent 8 years protecting her son from a truth she never gave either of us the chance to carry together, and that the cost of that protection landed entirely on me. I still fill prescriptions every day for people managing conditions someone once told them not to worry about. I think about Corinne's letter sometimes, sitting unopened in a doctor's office file for 8 years, and how much of my own grief was borrowed from a silence that was never mine to hold. I didn't destroy my marriage by finding that envelope. I just stopped being the only person willing to look at what was already true. If you'd found out the blame you'd carried for years never belonged to you in the first place, would you have wanted to know immediately? Or would some part of you have wished it had stayed buried a little longer?